All right, everyone. We're about to start. Oh, okay. So that should be plugged in, and I need to turn it off and restart it? All right. Yeah. Just announce we're having a little tech issue. Okay, I think it's off. While we're waiting for, we're not sure what, this is the last day when you're filling out one of these forms. If you've done it before, all you're doing is checking attendance. And some people have been asking, why are you doing this? What I'm trying to do is find out who the people are who are on, who are registered in the class, who are not here. And you might say, well, any sensible person, if they're not planning to take the class, would, drop it. In past years, that doesn't necessarily happen. Likewise, being on the waiting list, likewise appearing for the first lecture and then disappearing permanently also happens. So what we're trying to do is find those people who are ghosts. And instead of having ghosts registered, on our list, put in some of you who are not yet registered who want the class. So that's the whole logic behind it. And if we had a bigger room and more GSIs, it wouldn't, I wouldn't care. We wouldn't be doing this, but this is the way it is. Now, let's see if, wonderful. Oh, okay, that's the little gadget over here. Wireless, okay. This may need a new battery. Let's turn it up and see what happens. Can you hear now? Yes, okay, that may even be slightly too much. Is it too loud? All right. So one gadget functioning. Let's see if we can get two gadgets functioning. Sorry. All right, we're on our third day. A few other announcements. There are study questions weekly. They're to help orient you to, what should I be thinking about in all this and the readings and the lectures. They'll be posted weekly on the website towards the end of the week, definitely before the following week. Also, outlines of the lectures are being posted on the website. Also, other little things like, announcements. Linda has done a marvelous job of going through the reader and finding the page numbers for each of the readings. That's posted on the website. And for those of you who may not have found it yet, the numbers on the syllabus refer to the numbers in the table of contents in the reader. And so at least I think it's all organized. And your sections have started meeting. And so I want to introduce your three intrepid GSIs. Stand up. There's Linda and Julie and Indira, and they are super well qualified. I'm just really happy. And so this week, you're going to the section that you want, and we'll see how many numbers are in what, and then try to even them out. I know you're registered in a section, and lots of people have been emailing me saying, won't work anymore. Just go to the one that you want, and as soon as telebears goes off, your section assignment disappears, and we'll straighten it out. So here we are, almost done with the introduction. And I just want to say one thing about probably you've all been looking at television a little bit, or your friends have been telling you, or you've listened to the radio. There is a terrible disaster happening in the country. And the name for that kind of thing in Buddhism is suffering. And you're seeing some of it. There's going to be a lecture that's on suffering, but later on. The Buddha supposedly, after he got enlightened and was walking around saying, what am I going to do? How am I going to talk to people? He was approached by some people, and the first word he uttered was the Sanskrit, or whatever the language was exactly then, for suffering. We're going to talk about that later for reasons that I think you'll understand what they mean by it with background better than if it just kind of goes on you like a big blob of mud the first day. But just know that the kinds of things that are appearing in the class are meant to address suffering in the world. Okay, today we get to mind in the world, nature of people, and the nameless. And what you are seeing up there is a banyan tree in Thailand. And that's the kind of tree that was called the Bo tree that the Buddha sat under to get enlightened. And what you see is a carving in the roots of the tree of a Buddha's face. All right. Let's first, because this is the end of the introduction part, review slightly where we've gone, so you'll see why we're going where we're going. Okay, still introduction, review. These are, what I'm trying to do is first give a kind of panoramic view of some basic principles and how to get into the frame of mind for the class so that things are not peculiar. So first lecture, concepts are different. They point to your experience, they point through your conceptual mind, and ideally to evoke your very own wisdom. Lecture 2, basic motivations are seen differently. Getting things doesn't work, avoiding things doesn't really work, and ignoring things doesn't work. So, and today, it's a challenge of the third principle. What's the relationship between our minds, your mind, my mind, everyone's mind, and the world? And in our science and our folk psychology and in everyday life, at least in this culture, it is assumed that they're very, very separate. Okay, that you've got an organism, here we are being an organism, and we have problems in the world. We have to survive and reproduce and send our genes on, and so we're born and we start right away looking around to see what's friend, what's foe, what's edible, what's poisonous, and making cognitive constructions of the world, and the world is out there with its challenges, and we're here. And later on, we're going to get fancy concepts for this called interdependence and non-duality, but the point of this lecture is to evoke in you your knowledge that you already have, that there's a kind of intimacy between you, mind, and the things that we call not mind. And I'm going to use the arts to make this point. I have a reading in the reader by me called something or other. If you depict a bird, give it space to fly. And in that, I do the evoking because it's a print medium in terms of quoting poetry and pieces of literature. But here we've got our ability to be visual, so I'm going to show you pictures today. And you might say, why art? Well, it has special properties. Psychology does not know what to do with what they call the aesthetic emotions. Or rather, there's a category called the aesthetic emotions. It's a kind of wastebasket that you put things into when you've got a class or whatever on emotion research, and you're told there are 6 emotions, happy, sad, afraid, angry, surprised, and disgusted. And that's it. And people say, yeah, but what, probably in the last 24 hours you've heard some music, and it's affected you in some way. Could you categorize it clearly and obviously in any of these terms? Or no. So people say, yeah, but what about, and what about, and then the answer is, well, those are the aesthetic emotions, and that's kind of, you're putting them in the wastebasket, or you're putting them in the to-be-solved someday file, or why don't you go do research on it. Now, what I want to claim is that the virtue of the arts is that you're switching from the survival mode. See, the approach, grasping, reaching, wanting things that we usually do, and the avoiding things or attacking them in order to avoid them that we usually do, and the ignoring, that's part of something that at the moment I'm going to call survival. We'll get a nice Sanskrit word for it later on. And switching to another mode that I don't know what to call, but just because we're dealing with the arts right now, I'll call it appreciative. Yes? What about? You think of thriving as a word to possibly call it? Well, that's a nice word. Okay. If you don't like appreciative, try thriving. And in fact, here's a great assignment. Think of it, and you can do this through the whole class, because the stuff of today's lecture we're really going to get to in the second part of the class, what to call this other mode, because a lot of it's going to be about it. And here's an example. Some of you have thought about this before, and you've got names, you have a feel that there's a difference. And something I just learned this morning, by the way, the relation of, you might say, well, yeah, but that's if everything's all right that you do this, and what about if I'm really having problems right now, I can't get into any classes, or my mother's sick, or something. Sonny Rollins, the great jazz saxophonist, a few days after 9/11, now he lived in New York in an apartment that was inside of the World Trade Center, and he was 70 at the time, and he hadn't made a record for many, many years. A few days later, he gave a concert, and what he said in introducing the concert is, well, I had to do something, and at times like this, for me, art is the only answer. Okay, now I've said, in the title that we're going to look at this in terms of nature and people and that which is nameless, and what I'm doing is borrowing a classical Chinese division of the world into these, and there Taoism was supposed to be the expert in the human nature connection, or the mind nature. Confucianism dealt with people, the organization of people, and Buddhism was supposed to be for this other stuff. And people would actually, it wasn't that these weren't defined as religions where you had to belong to one and be hostile to everybody and try to convert everyone in the others. It was that for different life functions, you went and consulted people from the different traditions. But actually, when you study them, each of these really covers the spectrum of all 3. So we're just going to use that. And remember the intention, if you're thinking, why are you showing me these pictures and doing all this, it's to evoke in you this sense of the relation of the intimate relation of mind to all of this. So, okay, this is the kind of Chinese landscape painting that you get that was there for showing relationship of man and nature. And from me up here, it's not all that clear. Can you see it better back there? There's a little, these are little houses down there, and then you have, they're part of this giant space, mountain, earth, vegetation. That might help. Yes, I'm sure we can dim the lights. Let's see what happens. And all right, well, now, Is this, well, we'll try it. Now, the thing to think here is, are these easily, you're going to have feeling tones about the pictures. Are they distinct, easily definable, or are they in this other realm where you know they're there, but what exactly are they? And also, does being, this is to contemplate as you see these, is that you're part of nature or intimate with nature. Does that have to be reductionistic? So do you have to say, oh, well, humans are part of nature. That means that really we're all just some neurons, and we evolved. And actually, you shouldn't even do biology. You should go back to chemistry. Now, chemistry, back to physics. Well, back to, well, obviously, I think you don't. It doesn't mean that in this context. All right, here's another one that evokes the same thing. And now we have those were earth and air. Now you have water. Those were still portraits of nature, but you also have the energy aspect of nature, which is called chi or ki, prana, in the Indian tradition, lung in Tibetan. And it's an aspect that's between what we in our categorization system call body and what we call mind. And this is the basis of acupuncture, Chinese medicine, Tibetan medicine, Japanese traditional medicine, which our science, now medicine is getting a little interested in it because now it cures things or helps people's bodies. And the research that's being done is being done from the point of view of how do we figure out how to do a double-blind study on this stuff, because how can the acupuncturist not know whether he's sticking the needles into the right places, or when we tell him to do it in the wrong places, it's hard. And then what does and doesn't it cure to the at least 0.05 or 0.01 level? What they're not really asking is, what is this? And I searched and searched, and long ago at NIMH, they wanted to see an obvious question: do the meridian lines, the energy lines in the body, correspond to the way your neurons are hooked up? And they found no, they don't, or at least what we thought then and probably think now about how neurons are hooked up. And the conclusion they drew was, oh, okay, we won't study it. It must be something else, like the fascia transmitting. You poke up one place and so end of not published and not investigated further. Is that a question? Is that over there? Can we perhaps turn them on a little bit? All right, let's try turning on the lights, and let's see if the next slide is any clearer with the lights. Better, yes? All right, so here we've got a water running. Okay, the chi part of nature itself, a branch, flowers. You can see the energetic aspects, the human figure. Relevant for storms, a storm, human figures, the human figure itself. It may not be that clear, but you can see how it's portrayed as energy. And it's not just the Chinese view. Van Gogh,